Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. In case you've forgotten, my name is JT Olson, and it's been a minute since I've been on here. I've got a chance to spend time with family, got a chance to, catch up with my relationships. So, haven't been doing a lot of these podcasts lately. It's been an off couple of months, but got a chance to jump on today. Wanted to share my thoughts because Buccaneers played yesterday, and it wasn't great. I mean, tell me if you've heard this story before, but Buccaneers defense wasn't good. They were in the game. They had a chance to win late, and they fell short. And that was the game against the Falcons. Felt like both times. This game against the Chiefs. Same story against the 49ers yesterday. So, I mean, obviously we're at a point where there are a lot of fingers to point. There's a lot of things going wrong. There's a lot of blame to go around. And, already right away, Bucs raised Bolts. Good to see you. Think Bowles needs to be fired. And if the season continues to trend in this direction, then I absolutely agree. I said from the beginning of the year, from the preseason, from the offseason, Buccaneers need to win 10, 11 games. They need to make a deep playoff run. That is the expectation. And if they fall short of that, that's a failure. That lands directly at Bowles' feet. Part of that is injuries. I see if you ask right on time. I do, to a degree, blame some injuries. I don't think Antoine Winfield Jr. is playing his best season, but I think his injury is lingering. I know there was some problems with no Kancey early in the year. He's our best pass rusher. Luke Gadicke missed a month. Now Godwin is down, Evans is down, and Evans being down is a huge injury. So I think that's a factor. But when you look at the defense, the coach needs to adjust. Once Servatier Dennis went down, you had to make something. And Dennis was quietly a really important part of this defense. And it's something that wasn't talked a lot about coming into the year because it was a relative unknown. But the game plan was always going to be, we're going to rotate KJ Britt and Servatier Dennis, get KJ Britt off the field in passing situations, and let Dennis get all those coverage snaps. And it was working early on. In fact, Dennis was going to outsnap Britt. He was going to take Britt's job straight up, and there was going to be no place for KJ Britt on the field. And that became very obvious after week 2. Not long after, Dennis got injured, and he's out for probably the whole year. So now at linebacker, you're left with an aging Levante David, who is still playing at a reasonably good level. I mean, he is cutting through into the backfield. He had another tackle for a loss yesterday. He was all over the field. But you can see a little bit in his coverage, he has lost a step. He is not prime Levante David, and that's okay. Even old Levante David is still better than most linebackers, but he cannot cover up for everyone else's mistakes anymore. And KJ Britt makes a lot of mistakes. In coverage, he is in over his head. In the run game, and it's almost like he's trying to compensate for his lack of speed. So not only is he slow, but he's trying to over pursue, and he gets out of position. And it's just bad. The linebacker play has not been good. So, I mean, I was a big advocate for Jason Light to make a move at the deadline to bring in a linebacker. I really liked Ernest Jones on the Titans. They traded him to the Seahawks for a 4th-round pick. I really liked Isaiah Simmons from the Giants. He is a coverage linebacker / hybrid safety / nickel. I thought he'd be a great rotational piece. Get KJ off the field in passing situations. Didn't happen. So that I put a little bit on Jason Light. But at the end of the day, you're Todd Bowles. You hang your hat on defense. I mean, you got to figure it out. J.J. Russell, Vi Jones. These are guys who you've had in your system for a couple of years now. You know what they're capable of. You gotta find a way to make this work because it's the same script every week. Middle of the field's getting gashed. Middle of the field's getting gashed. And we saw it again yesterday on that Ricky Pearsall touchdown. And I know that was J.J. Russell in there, not K.J. Britt for that play. But, man, you're trying very little to change it. And when you do, you're not really changing a whole lot, and it's still the same result. So it was rough. It was a rough watch yesterday. 49ers missed 3 field goals. They could have easily had 32 points in that game because those were all makeable field goals. So defense, even though they held San Francisco to 23, which I think is their second lowest point total of the year, they still gave up points. And yesterday, they didn't have the offense to bail them out. The offense wasn't very good yesterday. Part of that's on Baker. Baker was not sharp for a lot of the game. He missed open wide receivers. He underthrew Ryan Miller on that 360 spin touchdown, which was, I thought cool. It's like he accidentally hit the B button in the pocket, spun, launched it downfield, and he just underthrew it. He had Ryan Miller open down there. Sterling Shepard was open a couple of times. Just airmailed those passes. And frankly, this team isn't good enough to overcome a bad day from Baker. They are dependent on their offense because their defense can't stop anyone. And when the offense isn't humming, put yourself in a bad position. So they got lucky. They got all the breaks, 3 missed field goals, a muffed punt that set up a touchdown. I mean, those are the little things you need to have happen when you are not playing well. And they happened. And the Bucs could not take advantage of it. Offense was bad. Defense was bad. So I'm not into the moral victories these last couple of weeks. I'll say that. There is no Bucs fought hard. Bucs were right there with a good team. Pat on the back. I don't care. We knew the Bucs were a good team. You expect to be in games with other good teams. Like, if you're getting beaten soundly by a good team, then guess what? You're not a good team, and the Bucs have all the talent to be a good team. So I don't take any comfort in the fact that these games were competitive. They're supposed to be. And you're supposed to win some of them, and that's the bottom line, and you haven't been. If the Bucs bring back Evans... If the Bucs do bring Evans back, rest him for next year, or do you throw season away? I'd bring back Evans, and I'd expect to win. I would have Evans in there all the time, and I'm still hopeful for playoffs. Like, this was, if you take the 30,000-foot view of this team, this is exactly where we thought the Bucs would be. They just took a bit different path to get there. We always thought 5-5 or 4-6 going into the bye. You got games against Detroit, Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, the Falcons twice, the Eagles. Those are all really good teams. So if you can make it to the bye at 4-6 or 5-5, you're in a good position to go on a late season run. Because it has to be said, the back end of the schedule is soft. You come back from the bye, you got the Giants, then you got the Panthers, then the Raiders. Who's the best quarterback between those 3 teams? Bryce Young, who got benched? Andy Dalton? Gardner Minshew? Those should be 3 wins coming out of the bye. Then you got the Chargers, who are decent. Justin Herbert is a stud, but they are not great. Then you got the Cowboys with no Dak Prescott, the Panthers again, and the Saints, who you obliterated. So those are 7 games where the Bucs should be favored. And if you just go in and take care of business, then you're a playoff team. That's 11 wins. That's the expectation still. You get Evans back, and you should be able to beat all of those teams, even with no Wirfs. And man, Wirfs is such a freak of nature. I mean, we saw it when he got carted off 2 years ago against the Browns. He was healthy way sooner than expected. It looked season ending, but it turned out not to be. And this is the same thing. Dude is just a physical freak. Could have had his season end, but it's looking like it's going to be a 4-week injury. The MRI is hoping to confirm that today. And he'll be back. And as long as you get him back for the playoffs, you just got to make it there. So I'm not ready to flush this season. I'm not. My expectation has not changed. And if they fall short of that expectation, then you fire Todd Bowles. And you draft an edge rusher, and the world keeps spinning. But I do still view this as a playoff team. I still view this as maybe the second best team in the NFC. I mean, I look around the NFC, and who do I really think is better? Detroit. Even though the Bucs beat them, I still think the Lions are the team to beat in the NFC. After that, I mean, they were right there with San Francisco yesterday with no Mike Evans. No worse for half the game. They've beat the Eagles. They've beat the Commanders. I don't think the Falcons are better than the Bucs. I think it's just bad injury timing. Losing Mike Evans the week before, last time, they had no Antoine Winfield, no Kalijah Kancey in the first game. And you get this Bucs teams healthy, I don't think there's two better teams in the NFC. Maybe the Rams, because I respect Stafford and I respect Sean McVay, but their defense isn't good either. I don't think Bowles has lost the locker room. I think there's some frustration growing, and I think that's natural when you're losing. But I think Todd Bowles is well respected. I think he covers for a lot of his players in press conferences, when I know fans do not like that. But I think players respect that because he's going out and he's taking bullets for them. You know, he can't just say KJ Britt sucks. Jordan Whitehead has been a real disappointment from coming back. Like he's not going to throw his players under the bus like that. So he'll say things like, "Oh, it was a communication problem. We didn't execute." You know, all the coach speak. And I think a lot of the players respect that. Todd Bowles is a very personable guy. I don't think he's lost his locker room at all. But I do think frustration is starting to boil. Not going for the kill in Kansas City, kicking the field goal, taking it to overtime. I think everyone was disappointed with that decision, including the players. I think 4 losses in a row, no one's feeling happy. But you come out, you reel off 3 in a row after the bye, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, 6 in a row. I think all of that just blows over. So it's all right there. I'll still say that. This was the expectation. Going into the year, they'd be in this position, and the expectation was they'd take off from here and make the playoffs. Now, I will say the playoff picture is looking a little bit more competitive than I wanted it to. The Vikings being this good is a surprise. The Commanders being this good is a surprise. So that wild card spot that's up for grabs, I mean, the worst team is 6-3. So it's looking harder and harder to get that wild card spot. But you come out, you win 11 games, and you just let the chips fall where they will. How do I feel about the Belichick rumors? I'm not in on them. I think there's interest there from Belichick because if the Bucs do fire Todd Bowles, I think this will be the premier job on the market. I mean, you look at a team that are going to have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have a quarterback. They have Mike Evans. They have a bunch of running backs. They have a bunch of studs on defense, Antoine Winfield, Kalijah Kancey, Vita Vea. Yaya's a developing young edge who I think is really promising. There's a ton of talent on this team. So I think every coach who's looking for a job, the Bucs are going to be at the top of their list. So I believe there's interest there from Belichick. I'm just not interested in hiring an 80-year-old coach. I mean, the window could be open next year for the Bucs to win a Super Bowl, so that makes it a little interesting. But I'd rather get a guy like Ben Johnson, who's going to be here for the next 20 years if things go well, not a guy who's going to be here for 2. So I get it. I mean, the resume is spectacular, probably the best coach ever. It's just you bring him in, he establishes his culture, which is very different than what the Bucs have. And he tries to do it his way, and I just don't think there's enough time to really put what he wants to put in place that made him great in New England. I mean, he was doing that for decades. the Patriots way worked because Belichick had the cachet to install that and back it up. And I mean, even if he brings it here, it's not going to really take root in the first year. And is there going to be a second year with a guy who's that old? I don't know. So I'd rather go in a younger direction. I'd rather look at it from the big picture, whether that's promoting Liam Cohen or hiring the Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. I'd rather go with a younger coach who I think has a longer future in the league, especially an offensive coach. Bill Belichick's a defensive guy. And when you got Tom Brady taking care of the offense, you can focus on the defense. That's great. But Baker Mayfield is no Tom Brady. Baker's been good this year for a lot of the time. But, I mean, he is not a guy who's going to carry you to the playoffs. And we're watching it now. He's playing his best ball. And he's not carrying us to the playoffs. So I'd rather get an offensive-minded coach. I'd rather get a younger coach. I'd rather go in that direction than sell out for Bill Belichick and hope the Super Bowl window is open long enough for it to matter. So that's where I'm at with Belichick. So it's all right there. We got 7 weeks after the bye. You go 6-1, you go 7-0. Life is good. You're right where you expected to be. Bowles is probably coming back or retiring, and then you probably promote Liam Cohen. Maybe you make some noise in the playoffs. Maybe you get to the NFC Championship game. I think that's a real possibility. And if it doesn't work out that way, Bowles is gone. And then we get to have real and more in-depth conversations about Belichick or Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson or pick whatever name you want to insert there. You know, we get to have more in-depth conversations about the draft. Like I'm going to put out an article in the next week or two during this bye time about prospects Bucs fans should be watching because it's always draft season in my world. I'm probably going to put out a mock draft this week. Now, I'd love to sit here and talk about how James Pierce is a stud from Tennessee and he is the edge rusher the Bucs need. I'd love to talk about linebackers who could replace KJ Britt. About how Don Corleone is a really good defensive tackle, and I think he'd really improve the Bucs' run defense. Now, there's a lot of things draft-wise I'd love to dive deep into, and we will eventually. But we're just not at that point yet. Not to go super in-depth with it. Now, we can talk a little bit of names now, but in reality, Todd Bowles isn't being fired right now. He's earned enough credit to try and work his way out of this situation like he did last year. He's made the playoffs twice. He's won a playoff game. He was an excellent defensive coordinator. He won the Super Bowl here. He has earned the opportunity to work his way out of this. And I think he will. And it's not necessarily a reflection of how great I think Todd Bowles is, because I think he's a below average coach. But I think this team is good enough to where they'll work through it. Guys like Mike Evans, Levante David, Vita, Antoine, Baker, the leadership on this team, they're going to right this ship. The talent on this team is going to carry them through the next 7 weeks. And I do expect them to be a playoff team still. And I don't care who they play in the first round. I expect them to win a playoff game. Whether that's Atlanta or Philly, I'm not scared of any of these teams in the NFC. The only team I'm really worried about is Detroit, and they'll probably have a bye. So get there, get it done, or go home. That's Todd Bowles' future. It's a results-driven league, and if you don't get the job done, they're going to find someone who will. Christopher Cole, good to see you, man. Haven't been around in a while. Yeah, you're right. We need to get healthy. Getting Evans back. I know he's not going to win Offensive Player of the Year because he's been out. But, man, is there a more valuable, a more important offensive player who's not a quarterback than Mike Evans? I mean, once he went down, I feel like that's when the Ravens game got away from this team, losing Mike Evans. And Liam Cohen's done a nice job piecing it together with a good offensive line and a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of quick hitters to Rashad White. Kate Otten stepped up. They've made it work, which is what you expect a good team to do. But man, the downfield passing on this team is non-existent right now. And that just opens so much up. I mean, imagine instead of Ryan Miller, we have Mike Evans, and he's drawing a double team. How open is Trey Palmer then? How open is Kate Otten then? How open is Rashad White, Jalen McMillan? I mean, all these guys, everyone benefits from Mike Evans being out there. And not including his production, a Hall of Fame resume. Could be first ballot. Does Glazers have what takes to fire Todd Bowles? I think at the end of the year, if the results aren't there, I think it's all about expectations. And last year, I thought the Bucs were a little below my expectations, but they made the playoffs. They won a playoff game, so it didn't really matter in the long term. The end result was the same, even though I think they underperformed over the course of the season. If they do that again this year, I mean, that's trending in the wrong direction. I mean, underperforming in back-to-back years, if you miss the playoffs in that second year, that's a trend. And you got to part ways with that guy. And I don't think it should happen in season. Like I said, he's earned the right to fix it. But if he doesn't fix it, you got to find someone who can. Because the talent is there. At this point, it is a coaching issue. And I don't know how to solve it. Linebackers are bad. I'd love to see more safeties on the field, get more Christian Izien out there. Tyke Smith in the nickel, Izien playing more kind of like a linebacker hybrid, or you go two nickels, go more dime package. You know, this team is very deep at the safety position. And Izien is a tackling machine. Tyke is a good tackler. Jordan Whitehead is an enforcer against the run. And I think this is an important point. Bucs have more money to spend in this offseason. Yeah. Some of that dead money is going to come off the books. Ryan Jensen contract. Some of those void years are going to expire. So they're going to have a little bit to play with in free agency. And they paid a lot of their guys this past year. Wirfs got paid. Winfield got paid. I'm trying to think, is there anyone who's due a big contract? You know, Tryon Shank is coming up, but you're probably not re-signing him. Logan Hall's coming up, but that's no big payday. I mean, I can't think of any big free agent the Bucs have on the horizon. Godwin, I don't know if they'll re-sign him because he was having a great year before he got injured, and I think he's going to have a big market. And if not, I'm sure they'd love to get him back at a reasonable price. But I don't know. That's something the market will decide. If he's affordable and if it makes sense, I think they'll re-sign him. If you have to invest a lot of money, it's hard to invest that much into two 30-year-old wide receivers. So we'll see how that plays out. That's to be determined. Other than that, you have a little bit of flexibility to go get an edge rusher, go get a linebacker. You know, you don't have to build a defense through free agency, but you can supplement it. You know, you've got Vita, you've got Kancey, you've got Yaya, you got Winfield, all guys you've drafted and you've developed and you've built this defense. If you want to go take a linebacker from like the Cardinals or the Patriots or somewhere else, you know, bring in one guy who will help you. That's fine. You know, you traded for JPP. JPP was a huge part of this defense. Didn't develop him, and that's okay. You can add guys. You can't add a whole defense, but you can add one or two pieces that put you over the top. So go out, get a linebacker, get an edge rusher. Maybe another corner. And we've had some bad injury luck at corner this year with Bryce Hall Bryce Hall, not Breece Hall. Breece Hall's the running back. Bryce Hall getting injured the first game of the year, out for the season. That was a big loss for their depth at corner. Then Dean's been out for a month. He's on IR. So you've lost your backup right away. Now you've lost a starter, so you got your backup's backup in there. You're rotating him with his backup, trying to figure out which guy works better. So go get a depth corner, maybe. Got options. You don't need a ton. Talent-wise, the Bucs are close. I don't think they're in their Super Bowl window yet, but they're not that far off from it. Just got to get better with their coverage over the middle, maybe more safety play. Got to fix their coaching problems. Be a little bit more aggressive at the end of these games. Try and win, not avoid losing. I think they're right there. We don't need to draft an edge. We need to get a big free agent edge. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure who's on the market yet. I'm not looking that far into the offseason at this point. But someone maybe like Azeez Ojulari. I know he's a free agent. He's someone I was interested in the Bucs trading for. He's someone I liked coming out of the draft. So maybe him. Can't think of any other names that I know are available. But I'm not against, going out and acquiring a guy like that. Someone proven. But there are a lot of good edge rushers in this draft. I'll say that. I'm early in my draft work right now. James Pierce, I think, is a stud. I really like Josiah Stewart from Michigan. He's kind of built in that Shaq Barrett role. He's undersized, but he's bendy and he's feisty. There's that big dude from Texas A&M. I think I'd stay away from like the bigger, more physical edges because you already got that in Yaya and you got that in Braswell. I want someone who is fast. I want someone who is bendy. James Pierce is my guy from Tennessee. I really, really want him in a Bucs uniform. I just don't know if they'll be bad enough to draft him. If he's going 10 to 15, I don't know if the Bucs are going to be picking in that range. But there are a lot of good edges in this class. So I'm just going to look at it no matter what happens as a win-win. You either make the playoffs, you make a playoff run. This team is exactly what we expected them to be. Or you don't make the playoffs, you fire Todd Bowles, and you bring in the next guy. Someone who's a little bit more offensive-minded, maybe. You get a good draft pick. You can draft a guy like James Pierce. Maybe a guy like Abdul Carter, linebacker / edge for Penn State. He's kind of a Micah Parsons mold. 6'3", 250, freak athlete, gets after the quarterback. You get someone like that who can disrupt the passer with speed, with athleticism. And that's a really nice compliment to Yaya on the other side. So I'm not against that at all. And that's the bad case scenario. Good case scenario, you make the playoffs, you go on a playoff run. So either way, I'm going to be fairly happy. And my expectation is playoffs, but if it doesn't go that way, that's not the worst thing either. Yeah, I do think Bowles will be back if he makes the playoffs, especially if he wins a playoff game. It's hard to see them parting with him at that point. Maybe he'll retire because Todd has said he doesn't want to coach late into his 60s like Bruce Arians did. His kids are in college, they're playing college football. He wants to spend more time with them. He wants to watch them play. So maybe he goes the retirement route after this year. Maybe he's got one more year after this. I don't know. I think at this point, I think they make the playoffs and I expect him back next year. Because that's what I think this team is capable of. I think that's what they will do in terms of making the playoffs. And if he should be back or not, I don't know. Because I don't love the way this team is trending, especially on defense. But like I said before, it's a results-based league. If you keep making playoffs and you keep winning playoff games, guess what? You're going to keep coaching. So, yeah, I'd agree with that. His job will be safe if they make the playoffs. I think he has to win a playoff game. That would be my expectation. Maybe even 2. Because I think that's what the talent dictates. But I think if he gets there, I think he'll be safe. get Brian Johnson does open a Super Bowl window. Yeah, I really like Ben Johnson. I think that's who you're referring to as Ben Johnson, not Brian Johnson. But yeah, he's the offensive coordinator for the Lions. Lions have an incredibly good offense. It's built up front, just like the Bucs. And they don't have a guy like Mike Evans. So you get an offensive mind like that, Mike Evans to work with, and a really good offensive line and a bunch of running backs and a quarterback who I think is better than what he has now. Yeah, you're in your Super Bowl window then, assuming it translates to head coach, because there are so many other factors to being a head coach than just the X's and O's. Which is why I'm a little bit hesitant with Liam Cohen. Just because a guy has a brilliant offensive mind doesn't mean he'd be a great head coach. Foles has a brilliant defensive mind, and he's a terrible head coach. His defense got worse. His decision-making isn't good. Everything trends in the wrong direction once Bowles becomes the head coach. But as a coordinator, he's fantastic. So maybe that's the same with Ben Johnson. Maybe it's not. You can't really say. It's one of those things you have to be in the room for. You have to interview him. You have to get a feel for the man. Is this a leader? Are players going to respect this person? And I can't say as an outsider if they will or not. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Ben Johnson's my top guy. Liam Cohen has impressed me this year. I would hate to see him leave elsewhere for a head coaching job. So I'd rather have him than Bowles just because I'm afraid to lose him. But I don't want to anoint anyone yet. Those are my two leaders in the clubhouse. But I'm going to trust Jason Light in the interview process. It's one of those things you can't know as an outsider. You have to be in the interview. You have to know who is going to lead the team, who is going to hold players accountable, because that's very different than drawing up plays. If I'm the Glazers, unless they win multiple playoff games, I fire Bowles, and I would target Ben Johnson. Because Adam Schefter was on ESPN talking the other day. He said Ben Johnson is going to be very selective about the jobs he interviews for, about the jobs he looks at. And I think that the Bucs are going to be the best job on the market. I mean, you don't necessarily want to work for the Panthers or the Cowboys or the Raiders or the Browns. Like, none of those are really good jobs. The Buccaneers, you could win a Super Bowl next year if you're doing a good job. Maybe they want Bill Belichick. Light does have the relationship with him. He's got the track record. It's just not the direction I would go. I would have a lot of questions about it. I would want to know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. I would be hesitant with that direction, but I wouldn't be mad at it necessarily. Bill Belichick is a 6-time Super Bowl champion. I don't see it working. But again, I'm not in that room. I don't really know what the candidates look like up close as leaders. I would just have a lot of questions. Yeah, a lot of people like Baker Mayfield. I mean, Bruce Arians went to war for Baker Mayfield. He was a huge advocate of Baker Mayfield. I think that's why Jason Light ended up bringing him in. Baker, he is all those things you want as a coach. He is gritty. He is tough. He is a leader. He, a lot of times, is smart. Although, sometimes he makes some real brain-dead throws. But he's cut back on those since coming to Tampa Bay. I got to give him all that credit. The only thing I really knock him for at this point, sometimes he's inaccurate, like yesterday, which hurts the team. And, sometimes those brain-dead throws do pop up. But other than that, there's really a lot to like about Baker right now. Yeah, I think those are the three names. Bill Belichick, Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen. No one else really jumps out at me at this point. I'm interested in Brian Daboll if he gets fired in New York. I do think he's a good coach. That roster is just really bad. His GM is not good. Like, everything about the Giants is a mess. But I really like Brian Daboll. I like the guy who replaced him in Buffalo as the offensive coordinator, and this is like 2 or 3 offensive coordinators since Dable was there, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I like the Bills' offensive coordinator right now. I think he was the offensive coordinator at LSU when Joe Burrow was there and Jamar Chase was there, and I think he was the offensive coordinator for the Panthers a couple of years ago, but he got fired as kind of a scapegoat. What is that guy's name? Joe Brady. Yep, Joe Brady. He was the OC at LSU. He was the OC with the Panthers for a minute, and he's a guy who's really young. So him being as successful as he is at his age is really impressive. I think he's got a really bright future. I don't think I'm interested in anyone who the Cowboys have. Like, I do not think the Cowboys are a well-run team. Even Dan Quinn, I don't think I would have wanted him last year. And he's done a really good job in Washington this year. And he did a pretty good job in Atlanta. I just think his ceiling is limited. And no, I think Gruden's done. I don't think it's the same game now than when Gruden was playing or when he was coaching. And I think he's just in a better role as an analyst right now. He can break things down. He can, watch and observe and commentate and all those kind of fun things that get him paid. But I think his days coaching are over. And that's aside from, any of the off the field stuff that might be a problem, because he had that thing a few years ago with some racist emails. Not a good look for him. I won't pretend to know anything about his character, but man, from the outside looking in, that's really not a good thing for your career. So there's a lot of reasons to think that Gruden is done. But, again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on potential head coaches and potential draft picks. There's going to be time for that. Right now, it's about the path ahead of you. 7 games that'll determine this team's future. Whether it's more Todd Bowles or whether it's Bill Belichick or Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen. So I'm probably going to wrap it up right there. I haven't done this in a while. Obviously, co-host Garrett Ballard, not on this one. This is a time where he typically works, but it'd been so long since I hopped on here and did a podcast. I wanted to take a little while to do that, get my thoughts out there in a time where the Bucs are kind of spiraling, and just remind everyone, this isn't a time to panic. This isn't a time to cash in your chips for the season. The Bucs have every expectation to still be a playoff team. And it's okay to not love what you've seen, because I certainly don't. And it's okay to not be happy with Bowles, because I'm not. But it's not time to tank. It's not time to fire coach in season. It's not time to fire Jason Light. I've seen some people on Twitter calling for that. Like he's not a top 5 GM in the league all of a sudden. This is what we expected coming into the year. And it's looked uglier than we've expected, but it's still right where we thought we'd be. So we'll see how these 7 games play out. 6-1, 7 in a row. That's the expectation. It's not the hope. It's the expectation. Anything short of that is a failure. No 2 ways about it. If you missed the playoffs, you did a bad job, because it's a playoff talent team. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. You can catch me on Bucs Report. All my written content is there. You can catch a lot of really other good shows, people who are probably a lot smarter than me. Check them out. A lot of good content to be had over there. So I'm going to try to get back into the normal routine. Friday nights, 9:30. That's what we're hoping for. Got to get Garrett back here. He's been working a lot. I've been doing a lot of things, spending time with family. And you want to get back into the routine. Want to get back to the grind. I miss it, to be honest. I'm never going to get spending time with family, but I do miss getting on here and talking football. So I'm going to try and get back on more, get back to that regular. Until then, I'll probably take this week off. Just focus on the articles, get back in the swing of things. We'll probably be back, not this Saturday, but next Friday at 9:30, and we'll go from there. And until then, go Bucs.